So good evening, RRISD families. Thank you for coming to our first in our series of Building Resilient Kids. We are super excited to have you all here today, and I'm really looking forward to the session myself, having young kiddos as well at home. I just want to let you know that this session is being recorded, so we will be using it as a resource for families afterwards. So if they have families that are unable to attend, they can access this resource on our parent program's website. So if you haven't already signed in, please put your name in the chat box and we will begin in just a couple of minutes. So I'll introduce myself first off. My name is Jyoti Appiah. I am the parent liaison in the parent team, and I serve part of the McNeil Learning Community. And I am joined this evening with Anne Grisham, my colleague. You want to say hi, Anne?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. We're really happy you're here. I'm also on the parent team with Jyoti. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Anne. So although you only see two of us, we have a whole team behind us, and they are here today as well to support this event. And as we move on to participating in a virtual meeting, we'd just like to let you know that we want you to encourage participation today. So we want to open the chat feature to you to put some questions and comments in. So listen with an open mind and use the chat feature. But what I would say is to try and keep the topic to the chat to the topic even. So if you have any questions, pop them in and we'll leave some time towards the end to for the questions to be answered. So how do you use a chat feature? So if you look on the top right of the corner, you'll see a white box with some black lines. That is the chat button. So if you want to click on that, you can chat away. We also have a turn closed caption button on the bottom left. Now that button, you can change languages. So if you click on that, and then on the top right, you will find a drop down menu where you can access a different language as well. I am now going to hand it over to the person you've been waiting for. It's our amazing Round Rock ISD Social and Emotional Learning Coordinator, Rochelle. Thank you, Rochelle.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rochelle Fink, and I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more in a second. But today we're going to talk about fostering emotional intelligence in your children, specifically looking at that early childhood, oh so fun time, where it seems like you might go through every emotion in the book in a 2-hour time span. A little bit about me. I have spent the last 14 years in education, but I often tell people I have spent the last 30 years consuming education. I feel like it's at the heart and soul of where all of us are at. I've spent a lot of that time as both a school counselor, both serving schools, students in the school, but also in the private counseling setting, and have had the pleasure for the last 4 years to work at the district level to really set some tools in place so that we are having these conversations, not just in the counseling realm, but for all students across the board. But I think one of the things that has kind of changed the game for me a little bit, because you can study this stuff all day long, but until you live it as a parent, which I have had the pleasure of doing for the last 3.5 years, you see Addison in her princess sunglasses that she is just all about. She's 3.5 years old and is the spunk of everything, and has taught me everything I needed to know about emotional intelligence in kids. I studied it all the time, and then I had a child and said, oh, this is what this is really like. And then Mr. Dean is 10 months old, and you may hear either she may come join us at some point today, and I think that'll totally be okay as well. And you may hear Dean downstairs. He is currently teething, so it's just a fun time in our house right now. But this is just a little bit about who I am. You can also find me on Twitter if you are a Twitter follower. My handle is there, and I often will post things there, either for campuses, but also sometimes just for parents, that if I find something that I'm like, this is a really good idea, or a resource that I think would be really helpful. So today we're really going to look at how do we coach kids through emotional intelligence? How do we foster emotional vocabulary and emotional literacy with our kids? But also as adults, it's incredibly important for us to understand our own emotional intelligence. And so that is, you're going to hear a lot of that interwoven throughout today. But if I were to leave you with this question, how are you feeling today? Will you put in the chat, what is a common thing that you might use to describe how you're feeling on any given day? How do you feel? And then what you see?
We are seeing lots of fines. I think that's pretty common right now. Overwhelmed, stressed, tired, searching. One mom says great, which is really good news. Frustrated. I think we're all feeling a little bit of this. Content, managing. Yeah. Oh, so one mom says drained. That's a big one.
I hear you completely, especially this time of year when it feels like there's so much stuff happening all around us. And as we head into the holiday season, I feel like those are all things that we hear consistently when talking, not just with parents, but with humans in general. I jokingly say every time this shirt pops up on my Twitter or on my Facebook feed, like, I need to buy this shirt because this describes everything. But oftentimes when I ask this question, I will see things like, I'm okay, I'm fine. Or my favorite one is meh, right? Like, I'm meh. And the thing that's really important is none of these are actually feelings. I think as I look through the chat feature, I see parents that are much more emotionally literate than I think you would think you are. These words we often use to describe how we're feeling because it's often that like, I don't want to talk about it, leave me alone. Like this feels a little bit uncomfortable for me to tell you that I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling drained. Especially at 6 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday night where you might be like, I have a million things I need to do. There's a million things happening all around me. And you're asking me how I'm feeling? It's like, yes, I actually am asking you how you're feeling. And so when we become really nuanced in our vocabulary, and I'm going to give you a tool here in a second that can help with this, we're able to foster a vocabulary within our children and within ourselves where we can say, but how am I really feeling so that I can identify a strategy to help regulate that behavior or help regulate that emotion if it's emotion that needs regulated. And so today we're going to talk about kind of what is emotional intelligence and what does this look like, feel like, and sound like is often a phrase I like to use. We're going to talk about in terms of managing a wave. And we'll talk about why that analogy becomes so important in a second. But that wave component is going to be critical, I think, to really looking at what your children may be going through on any given basis. So using this tool, this is one example of what we call a mood meter, and it gives us lots of different words to describe how you're feeling. You may or may not be able to see that based on the little tiny words, but if you were to pick a different word to kind of describe how you are feeling or a more targeted word to describe how you're feeling, is there one that you might see or a color that you might see? And if you'll drop it in the chat, and then we will talk through those here in a second.
And just to let everybody know while they're dropping that into the chat, tomorrow we'll send a follow-up email to everybody, and we actually have that mood meter in there. So you all will get that and you'll have your hands on it yourselves. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of some red. Somebody says content, happy, joyful, tired, blue, green. I like the colors. Exhausted.
Yeah. So this is a tool we use probably not so much at early elementary or at early childhood, but a lot with our upper elementary, middle school, and staff. So that's why I asked you from this tool. But in the email that the team is going to send out tomorrow, there are tons of different resources. There's actually ones that's just colors. Because some of our children may not be able to read any of these words, or there's some that are like emojis or pictures. And so the way that this would work is your yellow section is more of your like what we would consider happy feelings. Your red section are more of those like mad, angry sections. Blue are the like sad kind of down feelings, and green is kind of that like calm or chill space that we can be in. And as with the way that this is really important is as we move throughout different pieces of, let's pick yellow, for example. If I'm feeling happy, there is a wide variety of feelings that I could be feeling within that one bubble of time, right? I could be thrilled, which is incredibly different than being hyper. I might manage those two feelings a little bit differently. One might need me to kind of take a breath. The other one might need me to say like, well, what is it that I'm like, how do I get some of this energy out? But at the same time, if I'm feeling really calm and I need to do something like talk to someone else, I might say, I'm feeling really balanced, but I need to up my energy. And I can see where that lands based on the different levels of this vocabulary. And so it's not in that tool, but I can type it up really fast and kind of explain how this, the different degrees of different colors work within this tool setting. I actually use one very similar to this with my 3.5-year-old, where I will ask her like, Addison, what color are you feeling today? And she can tell me like, I'm feeling really blue or I'm feeling really red. It's been a long time coming. At first, she was probably like, I don't know what my mom's talking about. But she can now tell me like, I'm feeling yellow, mama. And it's just a normal conversation in our house. And it's often when we will use at dinner. So you could have this either on your phone or you could even print it out and have it. We actually, I don't think we have it on the dining room table yet, but we will, where we say like, how was your day today? And pick a color to describe how your day was. Hers are often yellow or green, but it's also a conversation. So if she were to say like, I'm feeling red, that tells me something has gone on in her day to make her feel that way. And I can kind of say, I need to be an emotional detective and figure out maybe what has happened. Or maybe it's just, as you know, with any 3-year-old, maybe it's just in that moment that she's feeling a little red. So this is a really great tool. And if you notice when I asked you to kind of use some other words, we've gone through things like exhausted and worried and different shades of colors. So we even have some like purple in there as opposed to just like red or blue. We can kind of mix some things together as well. So Muji is a spiritual leader in Jamaica. And I came across this quote probably about a month ago, and I really like it to describe emotions. It says, feelings are just visitors. We're going to let them come and let them go. And if we use the analogy of a wave, I want you to think for a second that you are standing in a lake or in a river and you can see the water. Emotions act much like water. Sometimes they are little bubbles and we can kind of manage them, right? Like they might just be there. They might be a little ripple. We can stand in the water and experience those ripples, much like you see down here. And we don't really need to do anything about them. They're just there. It might be things like feeling calm or feeling happy or even feeling a little miffed or like annoyed. You might be like, I don't know what it is, but it's not a big feeling. Sometimes there might be a wave that's coming at you that you can see and you can prepare for. Even if it's going to be a big wave, you can feel like, you know, this is going to be a big emotion. You know, this is going to be a big wave. You can kind of widen your stance. You can prepare and coast yourself through. Okay, I know this experience is going to make me feel fill in the blank, worried, anxious, and I have a tool to help me maintain my posture in the water or to maintain my emotional regulation. But then there's sometimes, and this is where things become a little tricky, that wave comes from behind and you have no idea that it's coming. And no matter what happens, it can either do one of two things. It can hit you from behind and completely knock you forward. And you're like, I don't even know where that came from. I don't know what this is about. I don't know where this just came from. But I'm definitely feeling a really big feeling. And there's other times where you know it's coming, but you didn't know it was coming that heavily or that big. For our children in early elementary, they're in early childhood, maybe up to 2nd grade, most of their emotions live in that big wave world. And even things that we think might be a ripple or might be a wave that we can see coming, for them are those things that just constantly are knocking them down. It's like a wave hitting a ship over and over again. And our job as parents is to coach them through, how do they widen their stance? How do they stand in such a way and become emotionally regulated? And that's a really tough spot to sit in sometimes, right? Like we don't think not having the green shoes is going to be that big of a deal. But to our children, that's often the one where you're like, I don't even know what we're arguing about, but okay, here we go. Or you can prepare children all day long, but when they actually experience the emotion, they have to find a way. They might be living in some of those outside or edges of that mood meter when you really think it needs to be more in that center because it's not that big of a deal, right? When we're adults, we think like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to make a big difference. But for our 3-year-olds all the way up to our 2nd graders, it's their entire world. So I really like this idea to think like, how big is this wave for my kiddo? And can I find a way to help them kind of manage that for them? So when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's often the ability for us to manage our own emotions. And I think this is where it becomes really important for parents. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to just reflect for a second. I don't want you to type anything in the chat. I don't want you to talk to anybody. I just want you to think. When my child has a big emotion, what is my knee-jerk reaction? My kiddo has a big emotion. What is my knee-jerk reaction? And then I'm going to ask some brave souls. I will tell you mine in a second. If anybody wants to type it in the chat, you are welcome to. But again, this is a very personal question, so you do not have to in any way, shape, or form. And then, Anna, if you will let me know what everybody said.
Melanie typed in exactly what I was thinking. Fix it. I mean, I think that's just a mama bear kind of thing. I want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Lupita says annoyance, and that is very understandable. I'm seeing if anybody else jumps in. Oh, what is it that other people are going to think of me with my reaction?
Yeah. Isn't it funny how that always happens in the middle of the grocery store? It never happens at home, but it always happens in HEB.
So true. So
Anything
true. Somebody says they immediately want it to stop. Attempt to bring them back down to center by downplaying the emotion. And it goes on. Yeah.
So, and those are, I will tell you, my knee-jerk reaction is that feel like I agree with Lupita. I'm usually annoyed, like we have got stuff to do, or like we're having this conversation again. And y'all, I do this for a living. So please know that all of these things that you are saying are 100% normal. They are 100% normal, justified. Like as adults, we can see all of the things, right? Like we are often that lighthouse at the top of the wave that can see the wave coming. But for our kids, they are almost in the middle of the water and they can't see anything. So the way we show up to coach our children through some of these big emotions, they will often mirror within us. So if we show up as annoyed, they are immediately going to show up in that red-blue stage. So if we remain calm, when kids have big emotions, the best thing to do is actually to talk less and listen more. And so what that might look like is I get down on their level. I actually did this last week at Target, and I got in the middle of an aisle, got down on Addison's level, and I just said, "What's wrong?" And I didn't say anything else. I just let her tell me. Now, mind you, everything she was telling me had nothing to do with what was actually wrong, but it gave her an opportunity to just get it out. But if I had pushed her and pulled, like we were in the middle of Target, like, come on, let's go. I'm not giving her a space to really feel valid and justified in the feeling that she's feeling. And for kids, that's the number one thing we can do is to let them know that no matter what the emotion is, it is an okay emotion. Even if we don't understand it as adults, even if it is 7 o'clock in the morning and we have got to get shoes on and get book bags and get out the door and get on our life, right? Like we have got things to do. Giving them some power or some permission to feel whatever it is that they're feeling is the first step towards really fostering resilient kids who understand their own emotions, even when we as adults do not understand them. I still cannot tell you exactly why in that moment Addison was so mad at Target. I later discovered she was incredibly hungry. She was tired. And so all of these things came together to create this huge meltdown in the middle of Target. And so I also resonate with Sybil of like, all of these people are watching me. Something is going on, right? What they're gonna think that I'm a terrible parent. There's a graphic at the end of this, but I also want to tell you that your child's behavior and their ability to deal with big emotions has no justification, like has no ramifications for you as a parent. It is this stage of life for our kids where they're trying to give words that they often don't understand to the feelings that they're feeling, which they first have to feel. And they have to have the ability to say, I'm feeling really frustrated. And I'm going to give you a tool in a second that can be really helpful for that as well. But the other part of emotional intelligence is to be able to identify emotions in others. And so that's where we as adults kind of become the coach for them in a lot of ways, where we can do a really good job of saying, I feel blah, 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 blah. But it's another thing for Anne to say, Rochelle, you look like you feel, and give me the opportunity to say, like, yeah, I actually do. I feel excited, or I feel hyper. Or it gives me a chance to say, no, I don't. And the more we do this with kids, the more they will be able to say, no, I actually don't feel that. And it's a pretty cool thing to happen. And I think one of the other things that's important, you'll notice this graphic on here has lots of different emotions within kiddos. And it's okay for, like, you might notice your kids have these exact 4 emotions in the course of one day or an hour, right? You're like, we're having this conversation again. And this is their ability to really figure out the world around them and where they fit and what their voice is. And so as we are able to foster their emotions, are the first way that they do that. Their emotions in some sense of control, which is often the biggest leader to all of those meltdowns that we see. So there's 5 skills of emotional intelligence. I'm just going to give you the first couple of words. If you think of the acronym RULER, it will be helpful in doing this. So the first one is recognize. What is the emotion? Either in myself or in others, and that's where that tool comes into play and is really helpful. Understanding the causes, and this is often more for us as adults, especially at this age. Like, what is it that's causing this feeling? It may be, like I said, it may be hunger. It may be an experience, like control for an experience. That's why oftentimes kids have really big emotions about shoes or about the color of a shirt, because they want some sense of control where they can kind of assert themselves as an individual. Labeling emotions with a specific vocabulary. So it's one thing for me to recognize it. It's another thing for me to say, because of this, I feel this. It's when they make a really funky face, they might say, I feel really mad. I'm like, well, are you, like, can you tell me more about that? Why are you mad? And in doing that, they're able to label, do I really feel mad or am I hungry? Do I really feel mad or am I upset? And what am I upset about? Expressing emotions in whatever that looks like. Again, we are giving kids the opportunity to say they feel whatever it is. You will, my number one tip for parents is often to say, like, we don't tell kids you shouldn't feel that way. How many times has someone said to you, like, well, you shouldn't be angry about that? And it actually makes you more angry, right? Like, you're like, but I am. Like, I know you tell me I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. We're doing the same thing with our children. If we say, like, well, you shouldn't feel, like, you shouldn't be upset. Let's just move along. Let's make it happen. In fact, we're minimizing their voice and telling them at that point in time that emotions are kind of in some shame involved with emotions. And where emotions kind of get a bad rap is in this last part of regulating with helpful strategies. So it's one thing for me to be angry. It's another thing for me to scream and kick and yell and do all the things that make it a not okay emotion. It's okay for you to be angry. It's not okay for you to hit your brother because he took your toy, right? Which is often a conversation that many parents have. Like, it's okay for you to be upset that you don't get to play with a toy. It's not okay for you to throw said toy. What else could you do? And to provide another strategy for that. So in looking at these 5, is there one area that you feel like, yeah, I've got that pretty well. I got that pretty well I'm managing that pretty well when it comes to my kids. So what area of this do you feel like you're doing really well?
You can go ahead and pop that in the chat.
Thank you.
We can talk about it.
Labeling. So this is where we're seeing the water coming, right? Like, we can see the water and we can immediately say, like Joshua says, name it to tame it. Absolutely. I love that phrase. Like, we have to give it a name if we're going to tame it. We have to tell kids This is what this feeling is called, so that the next time that feeling happens, they have a tool. The next time that feeling happens, there's a strategy. Otherwise, we're just constantly like throwing darts at a dartboard and it's just going everywhere else around it.
It looks like there's definitely the scope is out there. Understanding, recognizing, labeling, they're hitting them all.
I think one of the things that is not uncommon that I'm not seeing a lot of is expressing and regulating, because that's the really hard part at this age too, right? Like that's the part where you're like, but I don't know how to regulate a kiddo that's super tired when we don't, like when we have all the other things that are happening around us. Like that's an area that we as adults don't necessarily have a lot of control over. So some of the things that you will find, I'm going to give you a scenario and I want you to tell me some things that might be at play. So I want you to pretend for a second that you have picked up your kiddo from school. And Heather said, this is my house. This was my house yesterday. You picked up your kiddo from school and everything is great, right? Kiddo bops in the car, you're in the pickup line, or you're have finished virtual learning for the day and everything is fantastic. Your kiddo can tell you great things that happened that day. They can tell you a hi, or they played with people, or they talked to kids online. And you're like, absolutely, this is fantastic. This is a great day. And by the time you finish that conversation and walk in the door, it's like a switch flips. And you say, hey, can you take your shoes off and put your backpack away? And suddenly the crying starts. And you're like, wait, I thought today was a great day. And she's like, no, it was terrible. Crocodile tears, all of the things. What are some things that might, I use the word might because there's not always a one-word answer, might be causing that immediate switch to be flipped in kids? If you want to put them in the chat.
Yeah, put them in the chat. They're in their safe space. They're tired from a long day at school. They're hungry. All the fun of the day is over. There's no consequence for acting out once you've crossed that threshold of your door. Another sibling, things are become out of their control. Another comment, they're tired. They're hangry times two. Having 3 boys, I recognize that. Releasing their stress from the day. Don't want to have any more responsibilities at that moment. Hangry. I think that's common. Home sweet home, just let it all out.
Absolutely. I often say, you'll hear people say like, well, home is their safe space, so it's no surprise that they act that way. Like, it doesn't make it any better. Like, it doesn't make it easier on me as the parent. It actually makes me a little more frustrated. And so that's where all of these things, I would say, yes, absolutely. It could be they're in their safe place and they find they're like, oh, I don't have to have this face on anymore. It could be if you're coming home from school, maybe they're really hungry, or maybe they're really tired, or both. Maybe you could say, like, when all of these things happen, I like when Ann said too many requests at once. Oftentimes we give adult level directions to our kids. So if we were to say, like, I need you to go take your shoes off, and then pause and let that happen. I need you to go take your backpack off, and then pause and let that happen. It takes more time for us as adults. And I am the first person to admit this way of coaching emotional intelligence for our kids takes a lot of time. That oftentimes that's where that self-regulation piece becomes so incredibly important, because we don't have a lot of time sometimes. We've got to get the rush to dinner and the rush to bedtime and all of the things that you feel the time is ticking. The first couple of times you do this, it will take some time. But as kiddos become more aware of the vocabulary, or you were to say, hey, I'll use Addison as an example. Addison, can you tell me how you're feeling right now? And she can tell me, either point to a color, or it's something you can have on your phone as well. And she can say, I'm feeling really red. Well, I'm going to respond to a red feeling much more differently than a blue feeling. If she's got a red feeling, I'm going to unpack why. Why are you angry? If she's blue, it's usually because she feels hurt by something. So I need to find a way that I can find some space for connection to help regulate that blue feeling. So red is more of the something's been done wrong, or I need to fix. And in that case, it's often a red fix problem. A blue feeling is more of that, like, I need connection and I need to feel purpose. So it might be, if she's feeling blue, my response is, let's take off your shoes and then go, maybe we'll go color together, or we'll do something together for that maybe 5 minutes of time. I, as the adult, am going to set aside the rush to bedtime for 5 minutes and give her that connection time to help her regulate that blue feeling. Otherwise, it will keep coming up over and over and over and over again throughout the course of a night. And as she gets more hungry, or as she gets more tired, it's going to keep escalating to the place where at the end I'm like, ugh, I've had enough. So looking at those two kinds of feelings very differently. Initially, I might try to get it all out, right? I want to do all of it at one time. But at this point in time, we might find some things that managing those two different things a little bit differently are.
Do you have time? Can I interrupt you for a question? This is really, Matthew asks, should we expect kids to be able to explain the red feeling if it's a wave that's hit them? Mm-hmm. Or do we need to calm them down first?
So it's a fantastic question. In the next session, at the 7 o'clock hour, when I meet with the upper elementary and middle school parents, we're going to talk about the way the brain works. And so I'll give you a brief overview. But when emotions are felt, they're felt in like the center part of it. And this is the counselor in me. I use my hand a lot. They use the center part of your brain where all emotions live. But when we're looking at explaining behaviors, we're really looking at this front part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex that actually is not developed for most people until your mid-20s. But these two things can be really carefully connected in a way that we can give students some regulation tools. So if we're asking adults or asking kids to explain how they're feeling, we're asking them to live in this part of their brain when they're here in this feeling part of their brain. So we might have to let them calm first, which means we might need to give some space. And so you'll see on the very next slide, one of my tools is you might have to say, you look really frustrated, and we might have to give them the words, because then we're connecting these two pieces of their brain much more tightly. And they can kind of say, when I feel this way, this is the word for it. Or you look really upset. And then when they calm, maybe 10 minutes later, I might come back and say, can you tell, like, I've noticed you felt sad and we ate a snack. Do you feel better? And allow them to say, yeah. And then you can say, it looks like you were hungry, and giving them, I'm going back to understanding. So I'm pointing at my screen like you can see it. Understanding and labeling with the words that I am choosing. So I'm kind of going back and forth in what that might look like. So we need to calm them first. And that might even be giving them some space or giving them the words. When we're peppering with questions, we're just anticipating their level of anxiety and heightening it more and more. So that's where using a really soft tone might be helpful. And asking one question and then almost like biting your tongue. And it's so hard because you just want to fix it so you can move on. But being able to say, like, can you point to a color that you're feeling? And if it's a tool that they have, great. If not, giving them the chance to say, I feel frustrated, or I want to, and I will be completely honest with you, some of these emotions, there is no fix for. For example, Addison was mad yesterday that the dinosaurs on her shirt were purple and not blue. I don't have a fix for that. I don't have a fix for the fact that her dinosaurs are purple and not blue. But I can say, yeah, that would make me really frustrated too, and validate the way she is feeling. I see Josh.
Can I ask another question? What if there are multiple kids and one parent? You've got kids everywhere, and you've got one that's really needing that. And I mean, we've all been in there where you just feel so torn.
Yeah, that was my house 20 minutes ago. So I think a couple of things you can do. If there is a space where because you always want to do these things in private as much as you can, because then we're allowing a space for almost more safety as opposed to, it can turn into a space of shaming sometimes. So if we do it in a quiet space, the better. But at the same time, if you can get kids busy on, maybe older kids go and play in the backyard or color or do something to keep them busy so you can have that conversation. But I also think there is no harm in kids hearing from other kids their emotional vocabulary. So if they're hearing in the background, you coaching kids through emotions, they're actually maintaining their own emotional intelligence. Because remember, part of emotional intelligence is recognizing emotions in others. And then one of the really cool things that I've seen happen in schools and in my private counseling sessions is they can start to coach each other. And they can say, like, you feel really frustrated. Let's try coloring, or let's go for a walk, or you feel really frustrated. Can you tell me what happened? And so as they hear you coaching your kids through an experience, they're picking up on those strategies as well. But I will also say that those are probably the number one places where you as the adult have got to be incredibly regulated, because it's really easy for you to spin out of control, preaching to the choir. And then it's kind of amplifying their feeling as well, or you're getting more elevated. And so they're like, you go up and they go up. And so you go up and they go up, and it just keeps happening until the explosion and the yelling happens. And you're like, I don't even know how we got here. Like, I don't even know what happened. But we get there. So I think there is power in them hearing each other in that space. We talked a lot, or go ahead, Ann.
No, please.
We talked a lot about a lot of these already, but I think fostering emotionally intelligent children and says things like labeling as much as you can, when they're regulated and when they're not, and for yourself. So my own, like, man, I'm feeling really frustrated that jar won't open. I'm giving them words for feelings. It almost feels a little silly sometimes to say, I feel blank, but I'm using my experiences to coach my children, and I'm giving them words when they are regulated, because when they are regulated and I'm giving them vocabulary, they're more apt to use it when they're dysregulated. The last one on here, identifying feelings in books you're reading, is a great opportunity. I know the last one we did was just on reading. And so this is a fantastic opportunity to say, what do you think? For example, we read a book called Bat Mouse pretty much every night right now. And so what do you think Pip is feeling when he falls down the hill? And allowing her to say he feels frustrated, or he feels upset, or he feels discouraged. She's able to kind of figure out all of these things. Modeling healthy coping strategies. It might mean that I'm breathing, and I might pull up an app on my phone and say, like, well, let's try this together. Calm is a really good one. They've got really good strategies for kids. Headspace is another really good one. I personally use Stop, Breathe, and Think, which I think has now been rebranded My Life, because it's more kid focused, but the sleep stories in Calm are a lifesaver if your kiddo has a hard time sleeping. And that last one, reassure children that all emotions are okay emotions, even when we don't understand them. Like, it's okay for them to feel whatever it is that they're feeling. Even when in our adult world, being in tears and like that last picture over tennis shoes does not make sense to us, but to them, it is their entire space, and they want some of that control. So as much as we can give them some of that control on things that don't matter to us, like, are we going to lose the end of the world if they wear purple shoes instead of blue shoes? No. But that might be a place where we can kind of give them a small win.
It's so validating. What about children who are on the spectrum? Emotions tend to be very high with ASD.
And this is a place where, yeah, it takes almost twice as long for our students our children on the spectrum to retain even this basic information. Their emotions are very high, where everything almost feels like a tidal wave every single day. Good, bad, ugly, negative, like positive, negative, all the things, they feel it in that tidal wave space. And Nicole, I agree with you. It can be incredibly exhausting. as we are able to use more of that vocabulary, and that tool might be really helpful where they might not be able to give you a word, but they can give you a color, and they can say, I'm feeling very blue, or I'm feeling very red. That can be a first step towards kind of giving them a little nugget of emotional intelligence. I think it just depends on the situation and where they're at in that capacity. So.
Wonderful. We only have a couple more minutes. Are there anything else, Rochelle, from you? Anybody else have any pressing questions?
I did leave in here some really good resources. I saw a shout out to The Whole Brain Child. I Will Tell You Anything by Daniel Siegel, and Tina Brunson is amazing. So, and Whole Brain Child is probably my favorite book of all time. I'll just leave it at that.
Wonderful. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think that's about all that's in the chat. Thank you so much, Rochelle. So validating, so amazing, and I feel stronger already. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Know that you're doing a fantastic job, and this is the hard stuff. This is definitely the hard that no one teaches you. I wish someone.
Right.
Thank you, Rochelle. I mean, I used that mood grid with my boys the other day, actually, and they were both going, "Oh, tranquil, what does that word mean?" So we had a whole conversation on what that emotion resembles, and I think that's great because it increases their vocabulary, and they're also exploring one feeling that we're quite used to talking about in society, right? So look at our website, and once again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedules to join us. Be safe and have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Everybody have a